as Narita just said very kindly, I have worked in employer branding for a number of years, and through my time I have done 7 global EVPs. And when I was talking to Natasha about doing a session today, I really thought, you know what, I've been to so many of these type of conferences, and you tend to see the beautiful output and this lovely creative on scene, but you never hear about the challenges and the bumps in the road and those sort of moments of crisis that anyone that's done a big change project, which ultimately is an EVP, experiences almost on a daily basis. So my session today is going to be hopefully candid and honest, and what I'm doing is sharing some lessons learned from my EVP journey. What I am is also a massive film buff, so I will talk in my slides about some films. There is a quiz, and at the end I will ask you, if I remember, how many films I mentioned or the slides mentioned. If you know, there is a wonderful prize at the end of it, and the prize is knowing that you're a bigger movie nerd as me. So just a bit about me, and do feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I've worked globally in many organizations like McKinsey's, Ferrero, Primark, and it's essential when you say Ferrero, you say it with an Italian accent. It's a bit like Barcelona, so right? And I've done a lot of EVPs where it's become a massive project. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is scope creep. I'm also, from a personal perspective, massive fan of words. My favorite word is shenanigans. I can be seen going to the theatre, hugging trees in my spare time. So an EVP is more than just the creative, and this is me. So I'm not just my LinkedIn profile, and there's a point to that. And the picture is an obvious one, because if you follow me on LinkedIn, I talk about chai a lot. It's in my veins. So best chai in London is Dishoom. Don't argue against that. And that's where we are. So yeah, I'm going to start. I'm showing my age because I call these Mystic Megisms. If you don't know who Mystic Meg was, she was a very, very accurate fortune teller back in the 80s, 90s. So right, the first one, and again, is candid honesty, a value proposition, an employer value proposition, a people brand, a people promise, a colleague value proposition, known by many, many things, is political. There is just no getting away with it, because ultimately you have an organization often trying to say certain things that don't exist at the moment, and there's nothing wrong with being slightly aspirational. It's when it's completely not accurate, and employees will really kind of knee-jerk against that, it becomes hard. So a lot of when you're working on an EVP, sitting in comms, sitting in employer branding, sitting in recruitment marketing, or TA as a leader, you are spending a lot of time almost behaving like the United Nations leader. You are really playing a path of elegant tension, which is understanding what the board want you to say, listening to your employees, doing your research, really understanding where the business is now, where it wants to be, and also recognizing what you can say accurately and what you can embody for the future. So this is very much that, you go into an EVP recognizing it is political, and it is going to be about energy, and it's about hearts and minds. But a lot of boards, and I've been in these conversations, and a lot of senior leaders will not want to hear what you've got to say. So be warned, be prepared, be resilient, right? Jack said it best. Lesson 2. And I've only got 20 minutes, so feel free to grab me afterwards, because there's a lot more than this. Lesson 2 is scope creep. So this is a lovely diagram that I use all the time. I stole it from Instagram. Scope creep. You start a project. We need an EVP. The why becomes important. Do we want an EVP just because we fancy a new one, or because the CEO and the CHRO have decided that everyone else is doing one? Scope creep is essential. And change management, which is what an EVP project is absolutely key. Everyone wants to change, but actually who wants to lead the change? It's a very small number. And everything you do involves transformation. Those conversations you're having with employees, where you're setting up focus groups, where you're doing surveys, when you're looking at trends and so on, you have to be prepared to say, actually, this is great feedback, or this is a really strong problem, but it's not part of our 12-month roadmap or our 14-month roadmap. And that's really hard, because as an employee, when you get asked for your opinion, you want then it to be heard. And there's a balance, that elegant tension between going, I'm hearing you, but actually we're not going to work on it in that first instance, but this is what we're going to do with your feedback, right? So this scope creep is really, really essential, right? Use an intersectional lens. And by that I mean, a lot of EVPs start off thinking about external attraction. We all know the last couple of years has been about retention. Our teams are smaller in TA. We aren't necessarily hiring as higher numbers as we were before. And actually that whole retention piece is becoming more and more important. International mobility, internal mobility, squiggly careers. And so I'm seeing EVPs becoming much more intersectional in their lens, actually being utilized to make sure people want to stay. They're not staying because it's a job, but actually reminding them about, actually, this is why you're staying, and this is what our culture's like. So I think revisiting the scope all the time. This is not a message to say if someone says to you, can we do this? Its computer says no. It's actually going, well, if you want me to do this and add this, this is what it's going to impact on the timeline. So scope creep is really important. The third one is, I've been in environments where once you've implemented the EVP, people think it's job done and they move on to the next thing, whether the next thing is looking at assessment or looking at a different part of your channel strategy. I'm a massive believer that the EVP is a North Star. It's your jumping off point. It's not the end point. And that's where a lot of massive mistakes happen. And that's when you get the classic, our EVP didn't work, or we need a new one, 2 or 3 years after the last one was done, with a lot of fanfare, with a lot of money, with a lot of time. And it's more than often failed is because they haven't looked at the activation. So, if you're going to take one thing from this, is actually over-index, over-resource on time, money, and activation, and actually reminding people that the EVP is not a tagline and just a creative, because more often than not, it's not failed. It's just you failed to actually bring your employees on that journey and go past that beautiful launch. So that's a really biggie. The fourth one is, it can get really micro at times. So by that I mean, I worked at McKinsey about 5 years ago, and I had a 9-week period where we were arguing over the words unique or best. Believe it or not, 9 weeks of meetings and calls. And if you've ever worked with McKinsey, you know how expensive we are. So you could actually accrue how much time was wasted, or spent rather, on that. We cannot afford to spend that kind of 9-week period now, right? So actually do something and then test. And then see how it's landing versus actually, I love this phrase, constant consensus leads to a collective coma. And that's what this sort of paralysis and sweating of the small stuff can do. This one, who doesn't love a bit of Ferris, right? So it's that whole move, do something, then test. Move, try something, then test. And this really comes down to actually your messaging. You really need your leadership to understand that it's not all set in stone just because they've signed off a tagline or signed off a set of messages. If this doesn't correspond or resonate with a segment of talent, you can change things. It's not like you've written it and that's it, it's done. So, in this sort of world of actually getting so much great data and analytics, it's recognizing that this sort of the paralysis that often the leadership have when it comes to signing things off can be relatively easily moved away, where you say, actually, we can change things. You don't really want to be changing your master tagline, but actually I have seen instances where the messaging frameworks become such a mammoth sort of monster of a project that actually, we've forgotten why we're trying to do these things. And again, that testing and evolving and listening to feedback's really key. There are only 7. And this is a really, 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 really good one. And I love this cartoon. This is from a guy called Tom Fishburne. He does a lot of brilliant cartoons about the world of work. We've all been in this meeting, maybe not about an EVP, but about something. You've done your research, you've done your analysis, you've created something, your candidates and your employees have bought into it. And then you get the big boss, the MD, the CEO, or the director of TA going, I don't like it. And actually the why don't you like it often is vague or ambiguous. And this is where we do need to be strong. And I have been in these meetings. I was at Primark, where I went to Dublin, present it with my boss at the time, and a very senior head of visual merchandising was like, I don't like this. And we were very easily able to go, well, this is what your visual merchandisers thought of it. So this is where you have to recognize that we are building the EVP and the projects of messaging, of content, of visuals, of videos, of images for the candidates and for employees. If there's no justification about why someone doesn't like it, you have to refute it. But it's a hard one. I get it. You know, we want to get paid. We don't want to end up being in a situation where the person that we're talking to and leading doesn't like what we're saying. But this is where that robustness, the integrity in what you're doing, and recognizing why are you creating the EVP, what's the problem statement or statements you're trying to solve, becomes key. And then lastly, I've done this 4 times where I've done the EVP work. My agency that I've partnered with has done a marvelous job. And then someone's gone, can you add this? Can you add that? Can we do this? I went to a conference and they were doing that. Can we do a bit of that now? Oh, actually, you know, I know you said early careers wasn't involved in this now, but now we want that. This isn't a movie reference, but, you know, you're not going to refute Coco Chanel. The more you add, it's more cluttersome. Keep it simple. Avoid what I call that sort of the big employer brand soup, where your messaging, your look and feel all sounds and feels the same. We all had this about 5-6 years ago where we were all very innovative and agile, right? And I remember going to a similar conference and someone had up on there about 8 different banks' career sites. The language is the same, the tone of voice was the same, the look and feel was the same. So distinguish yourself and remove clutter. And it is really hard because, you know, once someone sees something that looks really cool, they do want to add more and more. Be really strong to actually be streamlined and remove the clutter. And then, you know, I promise you a prize. There's also a bonus megasm. I've just trademarked that, by the way. There isn't a word called megasm, just if anyone says something to me, which is, it's really key that we examine the candidate journey, but also the employee journey. In employer branding, we often get sort of tied up into where does it sit? Does it sit in marketing? Does it sit in comms? Does it sit in talent acquisition? I actually don't care where it sits. Actually, it's remembering what we're trying to do, which is embody and codify your culture and make it clear and transparent enough that a candidate externally can opt in or opt out. It should be polarizing. If someone looks at the content I've produced or my team's produced on my career site, on my social channels, and talk to people and gone, do you know what, this isn't the place for me, that's actually a brilliant employer brand because you're not wasting TA team's time and they've actually opted out early on. So I think this is really key. The other point is, I think L&D and talent is becoming more and more integral. So actually thinking about the employee touch points and recognizing how you offboard somebody, how you actually take them through that squiggly career, how you remind them that they don't necessarily need to leave to have a career with you is becoming more and more important. So looking at your EVP, not just through the lens of a candidate, but an employee, seriously, is really key. Not just notionally, but seriously becomes incredibly important. So lastly, I've said that there were some movie references. I said there's a kind of a Q&A option here. Please don't use that Q&A option to tell me how many movie references there were. Grab me afterwards. But as I said, these are some of the lessons that I've learned. And the objective was very much, we've got to be really honest about why we're doing the EVP. And actually, sometimes it may not be the right time. So my reaction would be actually, why are you looking to do it? And actually, are there small changes you can make that will have a big impact? Because we don't necessarily have the time to be a big project or a big monster. Can you actually look at your messaging? Can you look at the way that your TA team's doing outreach? Are there things that have changed in your business that actually you can make slight changes to from a content perspective versus going down a huge EVP project? If, however, you do want to be doing an EVP project or some evaluation about, do you need a new recruitment brand? I'm ready and available, so I'm looking for a new role. Do feel free to contact me after this. Thank you.